Welcome, everyone, to the Locher Room. I'm Alan Locher, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Tony Award nominee and one of the most distinctive voices and dramatic presences, Robert Westenberg, is here today to look back at his incredibly long career that included work on and off Broadway, in regional theaters, national tours, film and television. He made his Broadway debut 41 years ago in Zorba, for which he received a Theatre World Award. Robert is now focusing his career on teaching, directing, and playwriting. He is perhaps best remembered for his roles in the original Broadway casts of Into the Woods as the Wolf and Prince, for which he received a Tony nomination and Drama Desk Award, Secret Garden as Neville Craven, and Sunday in the Park with George, where he replaced Mandy Patinkin in the title role. He also performed the role of Javert in the Broadway production of Les Miserables. Other Broadway credits include leading roles in 1776, Company, Abe Lincoln in Illinois, and A Christmas Carol. His film and TV credits include The Ice Storm, Before and After, The Stars Fell on Henrietta, Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, Swift Justice, Central Park West, and Law and Order. One Life to Live fans will remember him for his role as Prince Raymond during the Mandora storyline. Please help me welcome to the Locher Room, Robert Westenberg. Hey, Robert.
Hello, Alan. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for being here. Our mutual friend, Michael Park, spoke so highly of you as first his mentor, then co-star and friend. And I'm glad you could be here.
Michael's a great guy. We did Violet together, Off-Broadway. He was so wonderful in that musical, and I love that musical. And then I saw him again in Dear Evan Hansen when one of my teaching colleagues, Lisa Brescia, took over the role of the mother of Evan Hansen, and so we took a bunch of students there. Well, actually, we were there for our senior showcase, and we dropped in, of course, to see the show. And Michael was there, and it was just wonderful to see him again after all those years. And he was generous and kind, and he was fantastic.
I remember him talking about that because I think he spotted, he saw the group, he knew there was a group of students, and then there you were in the back or something, and he was just
yeah, it was fun. It was a great reunion. Yeah, unexpected
that.
for him, but yeah.
He's out in San Diego working on a show right now with Idina Menzel. I think it's called Redwood or something.
Okay, so they're working on the show right now. They're putting it together.
I think they're in tech today.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah,
I wish him the best of luck on that.
I know. Well, take me back to your childhood. I think you grew up in Fresno yourself.
I did. Well, I kind of grew up all over. My dad was in the service in the early part of my childhood, so I was born in Miami Beach, Florida, actually, and then we lived in Washington, D.C., which is where my mother's family was. Then we moved to California. This is before I started school, and my dad was from San Francisco, so we lived in San Francisco for many years and in the outlying areas. And wow. Then by the time I got to junior high school is when we moved to Fresno, California. So I was in Fresno from 7th grade through graduation of college.
Incredible. Where did your love of theater begin in Fresno?
It did, actually. Without boring everybody, I one of my best friends was a priest, and his name was Walter Minotto, and he was a lifelong friend, and he was the first person who ever exposed me to theater. And he took me to a Fresno community theater production of The Man of La Mancha. I think I must have been 19 years old. I'd never done theater in my life. I'd never sung in my life. I didn't do any performance at all. And I was in college, and I was an English major, English lit, and I had befriended Walter through youth programs. I was Catholic, raised Catholic, and he took me to this show to see a live performance, which I'd never been to. I had listened to musicals all my life because my dad was heavily into musicals, and we had the albums and the LPs playing all the time in the house. So I knew scores and I knew that, but I'd never seen a show. And so I saw Man of La Mancha, and it was a really good production of it. I know it was a community theater, but it was really good. And I remember I got very emotional. I was profoundly moved by what I saw. And I remember thinking, it would really be cool to do that. It would be really cool to make people feel that way, to be a part of that. So I continued in college, and I was an English major, and actually
that was at Cal State first. The English
again.
Cal State for English.
No, actually, I was. I went to a community college, Fresno Community College, for a little bit, and then I went into the seminary. I was in the seminary studying to be a priest. And that was in Los Altos in California. It's at a university called St. Patrick's. And I was there for only about a year and a half, and it didn't work out very well because the celibacy thing was something that I just could not subscribe to at all. But I sort of didn't realize that going in, in terms of what the ramifications of that were. So I left, and when I left, I came back. I did some traveling. I hitchhiked up to Canada. I hitchhiked down to Mexico and in Central America with two friends. And then I was going to romantically make some money on the East Coast, and then get enough cash, get enough jack up, as we used to say, to go to Europe and hitchhike around Europe for slum it for a couple of months. But then I realized I need to go back to school. So, excuse me. So I went back to California, and that's when I went to Fresno State. And I was an English lit major. And when I was there, they were casting a production of Death of a Salesman. And so on a whim, I just decided to audition. Oh, sorry, I've got to go back again. Don't want to bore everybody. When I was in the seminary, a gentleman named Michael Olich, who was a seminarian there, he was a senior, and he was directing a play, and the play was called Child's Play, and it was written by Robert Morosco, if I remember correctly, and it was a Broadway show. It was on Broadway for a while. This is back. I mean, this is 1973, 4, okay, somewhere in there, and he asked me to build the set. Okay, because he knew I had carpenter skills. I was also, when I was working around, I also did a couple of years as a carpenter. I built homes, I did subfloors, I did framing and things like that. And so he asked me to build a set. I said, okay. And they had a guy who was a Catholic who owned a lumber yard nearby, and he donated all this wood, and I sort of helped design, and I built this 3-level set, and kind of got lost in that and really enjoyed it. And as I was building the set one day, he walked in and he said, "Do you want to be in this play?" And I said, "Dude, I've never acted in my life." And he said, "Well, consider it." He said, "Here's the script, read for this part, blah, blah, blah." It was a nice role. And so I read it. And as I was reading it, again, it was the first time I'd ever encountered a text with the idea of saying those words, and I loved it. I loved the idea of it. And so I said yes, and I did it. And I shudder to think what it looked like now. If anybody had filmed it, thank God they didn't. I shudder to think what it looked like. But anyway, so that was my first encounter with live theater. And so in terms of doing it and participating in it. So, and I love the backstage stuff. I love building the set. I love being a part of that world as well. So then fast forward, I went to hitchhiking, blah, 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 came back to California. And as I said, they were casting for Death of a Salesman. I auditioned for it, and I got the role of Biff. So that started my sort of parallel career in college of being an English major and dabbling in theater as a martinet. I was just kind of doing it on the side. But then I thought, since I'm doing that, I'll take a class. And I took a class, I really liked it. And I took another class, I really liked it. And then I started accumulating more classes and credit hours in theater than in English. And so I thought, there was a point where I thought, well, either I double major or I eschew one of them and go one way or the other. So theater was much more enjoyable than English lit. Although I've been a reader all my life. I've never stopped reading. Every day I read. So I went into theater, and because I split majors and I had several schools that I went to, it took me about 5.5 to 6 years to graduate. But I ended up, learning a lot. It was a production heavy program, And so I just did a ton of theater. And in the summers, I did summer theater. And all of a sudden I was, swept up in this brand new culture that I'd never known before. And I found community, and I found purpose, and I found artistic expression. And I thought this would be really cool to make a living at it. So,
but the impact of him taking you to see Man of La Mancha.
Yeah, the seed was planted there, right?
Wow. Yeah.
It just and I didn't even know it at the time, right? But it just awakened something inside of me in terms of it was catalytic in terms of creating that feeling. Yeah.
But with that powerful baritone voice, you had still not sung yet.
No, I had not sung yet. So that after I did Death of a Salesman, that summer, Fresno Community Theater, where I had seen Men of La Mancha, was doing 3 musicals, and what was it? It was Rodgers and Hart, Boys from Syracuse. So they were doing Boys from Syracuse and Leave It to Jane. Okay, if you know Leave It to Jane, Jerome Kern, and P.G. Woodhouse, I think. And so I had some friends say, "Come on, Bob, come on." I said, "I've never sung before," right? So I had sung in Catholic school in the 4th grade and 5th and 6th grade, right? In choir. And that's it. So I knew a little bit about music and about reading music, but it was remedial at best, and rudimentary, I should say. Anyway, so I sang one of the musicals I loved was Paint Your Wagon. And They Call the Wind Mariah. I just adored that song at the time. And so I sang They Call the Wind Mariah for my audition. And I got a choral part in Leave It to Jane, and I got the part of the sergeant in Boys from Syracuse, which is the "Come With Me Where the Girls Are Free." He has a song. And so those were my first musicals. And then when I went back to Fresno State to continue in the fall semester, they were doing Godspell, and I got the role of Judas in that. And then I just started getting cast. I got cast a lot, and I really, really loved it. It's just a great golden period in my life, and making a lot of lifelong friends. And then at the end of that period, when I was about to get my degree, it came time to think, well, now what do I do with this? And so I decided to send an application. It was so stupid. I sent my application to like 3 of the biggest schools in the country: Yale, ACT in San Francisco, and I think Carnegie Mellon. So, but that's all I did. I didn't send any other applications. Okay, so I mean, I should have cast a really wide net, but I was extremely naive. And then I got an invitation from ACT to audition for them, and I went and auditioned for them, and I got it. So that was a master's program. That was the beginning, the very early stages of them offering a master's program, a 3 years master's program in acting. And they didn't have musical theater degrees at that time, right? They just didn't exist. And I don't know, BFAs in performance, I don't think existed yet. I'm not sure exactly what year. I think it's the late 80s, early 90s, maybe. So it was an MFA. It was an MFA in acting. In my first year class was Denzel Washington, okay, and a couple of other people that went on to have really strong careers. So it was a really high level program, and I realized from the very beginning I'm in with a really great group of people, and I felt really grateful to be there and to get that kind of training, because frankly at Fresno State, I love Fresno State, but in terms of the intensity of the acting program, it wasn't as developed as it might have been, but it offered all these performance experiences that really help you hone your craft. But anyway, so I was at ACT, and I was there for 3 years, and it was a cut program. So the first year class was 46, and then the second year class, if you got in, it was cut, it was 26. And then the third year class was 5. So we went from 46 to 5. I mean, and it was Darwinian.
When you say it goes from 46 to 26 to 5, is it They're picking the 26th.
Invitation only. Yes, invitation only. So they don't do that anymore. Most schools don't. It's just too brutal. So, but back then that's the way it was. It's how the finances worked, in terms of that and the scholarships that were being offered and all of that. So, so there I was back in San Francisco, where I had spent part of my childhood, and I finished up my master's degree there, and then we had a showcase in New York, just like it. But at that time, it was only the league schools that had a showcase in New York. The showcases that we know of today, they didn't really exist. Just the schools that were called the league, and that included ACT and Carnegie Mellon and Yale and NYU and Northwestern, I believe. So there's like 10 schools in the league, and so you all went to Juilliard, and you got like a 40 to 60 minute senior showcase, and it was in that Performing Arts Center, that theater there right at Juilliard. And so I went to that and saw the schools. One of the schools before us, on the day that we were there rehearsing while they were performing, and I stood backstage and watched them. I forget what school it was. It might have been NYU, and they had about 20 kids in their class, or something, 18 or 20 kids in their class, but everybody got like 40 minutes. Right. So we only had 5. Actually, we had 6. We brought somebody in from the previous year to make it 3 couples. And they so we got more stage time, right? Because we have 6 people with 40 minutes versus 18 people with 40 minutes. We got to do scenes with an arc to them. Okay. And I also noticed that the other schools did a lot of flashy stuff, very theatrical, very presentational, very a lot of pyrotechnics and stylistic stuff, Cyrano or whatever, and mixed in with other things. But there was a lot of high style going on. And we had Ed Hastings was in charge of our showcase. He was a director at ACT, and we were doing scenes from Lillian Hellman. That's it. Okay, there's no flash. There was nothing. It was just a relationship-based American drama. And at the end of it, we sang "Make Our Garden Grow," okay, because Lillian Hellman was part of Candide, so it was all connected. So when I saw the other schools, when all of us saw the other schools, we thought, "Oh, we're screwed." Ed Hastings has misled us. He doesn't know what the trends are in terms of what the expectations are for senior showcases, right? And this is old school and stodgy, and we're dead in the water. So we did our showcase, and it was all based on almost cinematic. It's Lillian Hellman, so Little Foxes, a couple of other plays that we pulled scenes from. And we did our piece, and then we sang a cappella "Make Our Garden Grow," which is, have you seen Maestro yet?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. And then when they sing it's one of the most stunning pieces of music ever written. So we sang "Make Our Garden Grow," and do you know who Jeff McCarthy is?
I don't think so.
Broadway performer. He's done a lot of stuff in New York, and he was in my class. And Jeff's got a huge baritone voice. And so he
looks familiar. If I look at his
and his bio, you've probably seen him do some stuff. He was on a recent tour of Chicago. Anyway, Jeff was a good friend of mine. We went through 3 years together of that boot camp called graduate school, and so we sang "Make Our Garden Grow," and then it was time for us to do our introductions. And because then every student said, "Hi, my name is Robert Westenberg. Hi, my name is Bonnie Bowers." And we went down the line. And so I was the first one to speak, and I stepped forward out of our line of, our bowing line, and I went to speak, and they wouldn't stop clapping. They kept clapping. And I opened my mouth to speak, and they just kept clapping. And I looked at my friends, and I said, "Well, I guess we should bow again," right? So we took another curtain call. And I stepped forward again to speak, and they kept clapping, and then they stood up.
Wow.
And then they started cheering. I'm not kidding. It was filled. The entire theater was filled with all theater professionals. These were agents, casting directors, managers, producers, all New York, trying to see this next generation of actors that are coming out of the graduate schools. And I didn't know that. Thank God. I just thought it's an audience. I just was so naive. I was so naive. And they, frankly, ACT didn't really prime us very well in terms of what we were running into. And I'm glad they didn't, because the more I knew, I probably would have been more nervous.
You would have been a lot nervous,
Yeah, exactly. I honestly did not realize what the stakes were. I had no idea.
I want to go back to you singing for that audition for the first time. I mean, there's one thing to sing in a chorus, but then to sing a solo, and
right.
Your voice comes out. I mean, you have such, a distinct and strong baritone voice. I mean, were you surprised at your own ability when you started doing it as a solo?
I was. I'll be honest with you, Alan. I never, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I never thought that much of my voice. I don't like the sound of my voice. I never listen to my voice. I never listen to my recordings. I just don't like to listen to it. It doesn't seem to sound like what I think I sound like. So I have never been a fan of my own voice. And when other people responded to it, and I got work because of it, and roles and things like that, it was an imposter complex. I just kept thinking, I'm somehow sliding by here, but I'll take it, right? Because it's fun, and I'll take it. So I just did my best to develop what I had, and continuously surprised at the response I get from it. So, and that's the honest truth. And I'm not saying that that's not a false humility. I don't need to see anything that I do. I'm fine doing it, but keep me away from anything that I have to watch it or listen to it again. So, yeah. So anyway, they started cheering. And I looked at my friends. We took another curtain call, and the girls were crying, and some of the guys were crying, because we knew something wonderful had happened. And I talk about this in my teaching when I'm teaching acting, that I think what they appreciate, this in hindsight, I think what they loved so much about the performance that they saw was it was just people talking and listening and being impacted by what was happening. People were actually listening on stage. So they weren't jamming the performance. They weren't trying to impress. They weren't trying to dazzle. They weren't trying to blow the roof off the place. Look at me, I'm amazing. And some of those other kids were amazing. I mean, there's Holly Hunter, I think, was in one of the other schools, and it was a great class of students. But Ed just said, no dazzle. Not just the basic architecture of human communication and talking and listening. And I think that after all of the theatrical stuff that they had seen, in contrast, they got this very realistic, honest, deeply explored work from gifted students that in which something was happening between them. I think at least that's my interpretation of it. And they responded to it so keenly, and it taught me a really, really big lesson in terms of keeping it real, keeping your foundations, back to basics. Every time you do a play, a role, directing, whatever it is, back to basics. And so yeah, so from that, all of us got offers from dozens of agencies, and it was overwhelming. And a little too easy, right? We thought, well, oh my God, I got an agent, blah, blah, blah. So I got an agent, and David Leaphart. I don't know if you remember David Leaphart. Probably not. You're probably too young to remember David. He's passed away since. But I went back to. I hadn't finished my time at ACT. I still had to finish off the last part of my year there, and I was performing there, and also still finishing off my master's degree. And while I was there, I got a call from Zelda Fitzchandler, who ran Arena Stage. And she wanted me to come out and audition for the company at Arena Stage, because her representative had seen us at NYU. And so they Arena Stage offered to fly me out from San Francisco to DC, and I lived in DC, and my mom's family's in DC, and then I had a friend who had an apartment that was going to be vacated for the summer in New York that he could sublet, and so I thought, well, if I don't go back east now, I'll never go. Somebody's paying for my flight. I got a sublet. I got the potential of a job working at Arena Stage, and I got a summer in New York City, right, living on unemployment. So I did. I flew out, auditioned for Zelda, and left on a train to go back to New York, and without knowing the results of that audition. And while I was in New York that summer, David Liephardt sent me out on a lot of general auditions, right, meeting with CBS, ABC, producers around town. And while I was in the middle of that summer, I got a call from Arena Stage that they were giving me a full year's contract with X roles, like 5 major roles in their 5 plays that they were doing. And I took it. And so I ended up spending almost 4 years at Arena Stage doing regional theater. Yeah. And I loved it. And so, and while I was there, I was going back and forth. So my first job in New York was that next summer. I was auditioning while I was at Arena Stage. It was about a 3-hour train, as 2-hour train ride, basically. Mm-hmm. And I auditioned for the Public Theater, and I got into Henry IV Part 1 at the Shakespeare, Summer Shakespeare, mm-hmm. and with Des McAnuff directing it. And so, and I had a nice role. I had Vernon, and I was understudying Prince Hal. Okay. And who was in that? John Vickery played Prince Hal. John Goodman was in that play. Val Kilmer was in the ensemble. Kevin Spacey was in the ensemble. I mean, it was just a ton of really, really cool people. And so that was my first time meeting John Goodman, who ends up, our paths crossed because I ended up teaching at Missouri State later on, and John is an alum of Missouri State. So anyway, so that was my first gig in New York, and then I went back to Arena Stage for a full year of working, of doing major roles in some of the greatest plays ever written, and continuing to audition in New York. And then the next show I got in New York next summer was Hamlet. No, The Death of von Richthofen. The Death of von Richthofen, written by Des McAnuff, who had directed us in Henry IV Part 1.
Did you work consistently from that, and I'm blanking on the word, not the workshop, what you did in front of the agents and all of that? What is that called?
Oh, the showcase?
Showcase, thank you. Did you
work? That's how I got my agent.
Right, but did you work constantly from that moment on?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I had that one dormant summer in New York right afterwards, but in the middle of that summer is when I found out.
That's at the beginning, and
yes, yeah, right. So yes, I like I said, imposter complex. I went, okay, if you think so, I'll keep doing it. But anyway, I was learning along the way, and because I'd done that show with Des, the first show, that Henry IV, the Shakespeare, and he, you know who Des McAnuff is. I mean, my God, he's a generator of so many works. I mean, he's a composer and a writer and a director and all that stuff. So the next summer he was doing Death of von Richthofen, which is an original play written by him. He wrote the music, book, lyrics, everything. And I got into that, and I played, I had a nice supporting role. And I was understudying John Vickery, who played von Richthofen. And John was a great guy. And he got sick when we got into performance. And that was right at the time when AIDS was starting up. Mm. And so everybody, I didn't know if John had AIDS or not. I don't even know, what John's persuasion is at all. And I still don't. But everybody thought, oh my God, he's out for a long time. I hope it's not that. And so I took over the role, and I did it for 2 weeks, and then he came back, thank God. But in that 2 weeks, a whole bunch of, it was a cause célèbre at the time, that show. I mean, everybody was coming to see Des's new show, and he was sort of a boy wonder at that time. He still is. And so all these producers came, and casting directors, and I think it was Barry Moss, who was casting the show, but they were casting Zorba, the revival of Zorba with Anthony Quinn and Lila Kadrova, who did the roles in the film. And they asked me to audition for Nico. And I got it. So that was a 9-month pre-Broadway tour and then open on Broadway. And so that was my first Broadway show. And, it's kind of a stepping stone. One thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, as most careers are.
It's so interesting, though, because you didn't grow up wanting to be on Broadway. You found your way
crossed
into
my mind.
Yeah. Did it still have as big an impact on you now that you had been in the theater space that you were going to be on Broadway?
I knew the rarefied air I was in. Yeah, I was extraordinarily grateful, and and yeah, I mean it was a great high. It's also a ton of work, as anybody who's an actor knows. It's a ton of work. You're grinding it out 8 times a week, and you got to keep it fresh, and you got to keep growing as an artist, and all of that. So yeah, I was really learning a lot. I think being in arenas, ACT and then arena stage, those two sort of premier regional theater programs, I learned so much in those years, those 7 years basically of just learning about acting and transformation and listening and the skills that you need to be on stage so that it becomes more effortless instead of effortful, and all of that. So I'm really grateful for all of that. But the Broadway, without getting into too many details, the Zorba tour, working with Anthony Quinn was not easy. Okay. I loved him, and yet he could be extremely challenging. And as soon as we opened on Broadway, I had decided that I wanted to leave the show. And and so I contacted Fran and Barry Weisler were the producers, and I contacted them. Excuse me, I'm gonna have a sip of water.
Go right ahead.
And I informed them that I was leaving the show. I had a 4-week out. And so I was with that show for 3 months after it opened on Broadway, and then I left. In fact, Jeff McCarthy, my dear friend from ACT, took over the role for me. So I left the show, and everybody said, "You're an idiot," and it was something I just had to do. I'm not going to go into more detail on it.
Yeah,
just personally. Anyway,
some things have to.
Say again.
Some things you just got to do.
Right, exactly. For your own, just to be able to sleep at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and look in the mirror. And so I left the show. And because I left the show, it made me available to audition for Sunny in the Park with George. Had I stayed in the show, I would not have been Sunny in the Park with George. So, I got that. I got the role of the soldier in that. And then when Mandy left the show after 6 months, I was understudying him, and I had gone on a couple of times for him because he got sick right after we opened. About 2 weeks after we opened, he got sick, and I took over. And when I took over, Frank Rich happened to be in the audience revisiting the show, and he did a radio review of the show, and I got a very positive review, very positive. That's going to be important in a moment. Okay.
But I mean, timing is everything.
No, just that. Yeah, that's sort of where hard work meets dumb luck. Okay. So when Mandy left, they did a big, audition nationally. Actually, they went overseas to audition, and they gave it to me. And I think one of the reasons they gave it to me was they knew I could handle the role because they had seen me do it, right? And B, I had a quote from Frank Rich that they could plaster over that theater. Robert Westenberg, blah 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 blah. And that's good for tickets.
That is good for tickets. Frank Rich at the time was a marketing tool.
Absolutely. And Frank Rich, for those of you who don't know, was the voice of theater for decades. He was the head critic for the New York Times, and a really astute man. But anyway, so I got that role, and I did that with Bernadette, and then I did it with Marianne Plunkett, and then the show closed, and then and all that's important in terms of my trajectory, because right after that I did some other shows, but then right after that, in fact, I went back to Arena Stage for like a year, I think, after that, and then Sondheim and Lapine wrote a little skit called Into the Woods. And so because I had already worked with them, they asked for me to come up and audition for The Wolf and the Prince. And I was working at Arena at the time, went up and auditioned for the play, the musical, and came back on the train. By the time I got back on the train, my voice message on my answering service said I got the role. My agent's already called and said I got the role. So it happened like that. But that's sort of the benefit of having worked with them before. I worked with them for like almost 2 years, right, on that show. You're a little over a year and a half. So I got that role, and this is a true story. I knew Tom Aldridge. Tom Aldridge.
Aldridge. Yep.
Tom Aldridge, because his wife was a costume designer, and she Academy Award winning costume designer. And I had done, when I had done some of those shows at the Hamlet in particular at the Public Theater, she had been the designer for that, and I got to know Tom a little bit through that. So when I walked into that first rehearsal room at the Michael Bennett Studios, 890 Broadway, and for the first day of class, right? And I walked into the room, and I looked around the room, and I was with Tom. And I looked around the room, there's Bernadette, and I knew Bernadette from Sunny in the Park, blah, blah, blah. So I knew a couple of people. And then I looked over, and there was this very beautiful woman sitting in the corner. And I said, Tommy, who is that? And he said, Bobby, that's your wife. Meaning that's the woman that plays your wife in the play. That's Cinderella, right? So the first words I heard about Kim Crosby were, that's your wife. And then I ended up marrying her 3 years later. So
I mean, I was going to ask that, because I did know that, but that it is wild that is the first thing he says to you.
The first thing out of his mouth. So anyway, that's a true story. And Tommy, God rest his soul. Oh my God, I miss him so much. Such a great guy and a great actor. But so then I did Into the Woods, and so I sort of credit Anthony Quinn for being so difficult to work with, for me meeting Kim and having a family and having children and grandchildren, because if he had been easy to work with, I probably would have stayed with Zorba. I would have never been able to audition for Sunday in the Park with George, and maybe never established a working relationship with Sondheim and Lapine, and never done Into the Woods and never met Kim and blah, blah, blah. So there you go.
Here's,
oh my God. Yep.
Talk about your relationship with James Lapine and Stephen Sondheim.
Oh, well, in terms of, first of all, they're both really dedicated theatricians. I mean, they know what they're doing. They obviously came to theater through completely different paths. And Jim is a digital or a graphic designer, and Steve, of course, we all know about Steve's history and his mentorship with Oscar Hammerstein and all of that. But what I loved about working with Steve and James was how specific they were, and how workmanlike they were, and how you could see it in rehearsals, especially with Sunny in the Park, especially with both of those shows, but Sunny in the Park with George in particular, how you could see them struggling with problems. You could see them not having an answer. You can see, oh God, I can't do anything with that now. I need to take it home and work with it. And what about this transition here, and blah, 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 blah. And I hate that song. It's not working for me. I have to rewrite it. And just all of these things that were happening. I mean, when we did Into the Woods, we were still in preview. We were in a very extended preview period. It was like 6 weeks. And normally it's 2 to 3, right? And they kept asking the critics, and the New York Times in particular, delay. And they finally said, no, we're coming to see it. You've had 6 weeks and then we're coming to see it. So But in that 6-week period, we did a lot of recalibrating, a lot of reworking. There was one day where I walked into a half hour. I walked into the theater and they said, "Bob, the wolf song is being removed. We're taking it out, and we're doing this scene instead." And the scene was sort of like the song, but not the song. And so Danny Ferland and I had to learn the lines for that, get on stage and block it with Lapine, and do it that night.
You know,
we did, and so we were totally workshopping it, and it was because of the power of Sondheim, that he could do that, and knowing that eventually you're going to get there. So there were 3 nights, I think it was 3 nights that we did that show. There was no wolf song, and we did the scene. And Steve just sat and he watched it, and he watched the rhythm of the play, how one thing connects to the next. And after 3 days, he came back and said, let's put the wolf song back in. He said, you can't have a wolf in a musical and not have him sing a song. He said, let's put it back in. So, but it was that kind of gutsy, playing with it and manipulating it. And these people are paying really high price tickets for these preview shows. And they were told, you're seeing a workshop. And it was really a workshop.
Well, one thing I remember, Michael Park was going to do Into the Woods at his local community theater. And he said he studied every move you made to learn that role. But I'll let him tell you that himself.
Oh, my God.
I'm listening to these stories, Bob, and I'm like, does anyone really understand that he worked with fucking Sondheim? I didn't know we could fucking swear. Oh my God.
Yeah,
there you go.
Like if you're breaking the barrier.
Like I'm sitting in between. I don't think I'd be where I'm sitting right now without the unknowing mentorship of Robert Westenberg. And then, Alan, let's be honest. You were asking me what kind of, shipyard, what kind of venue you should use for your podcast. And so here we are. So I feel like I'm like a bit of a conduit.
You are.
But
it's so good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too. I'll never forget how awestruck I was by the fact when Susan Schulman told me that you were going to be in Violet. I was like, I got to go take a seat for a second before you walked in the room.
Wasn't that a great experience?
That was a wonderful experience. And
yeah. I mean, such a classy piece, and so many great people in that show. Oh my God!
Seriously, I'm out of La Jolla right now doing something with Tina Landau.
So that's why I got. So are you working with Des at all?
No, I'm working. It's Christopher Ashley's out here now.
Okay, so is Des no longer in La Jolla?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I know it's Christopher Ashley's the artistic director now, and so I'm just sitting in a room with Tina Landau and Dina Menzel all day. That's
so cool. That's absolutely so cool.
Michael, when you said you studied Robert's performance, is it the PBS?
No, it was
no.
It was the original Broadway cast album. Everything he did vocally was so perfect and so well thought out. And please, you got to know that. You got to understand. Your viewers have to understand how awesome this guest is. I don't think they do, but it was more than that. And then you get to forget Sunday, but if you get to what is it? The Secret Garden. Again, if you get into how specific every movement and every note was, and every choice that Rob made.
I wish I could do them all over again and do them with what I know now.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? We do the best we can where we are in our progression as an artist, but after teaching for almost 20 years and still right, it just makes you go, oh God, I could have maximized that. I could have, I could have deepened that, all that stuff. But hindsight is 2020.
But then it didn't stop there, guys, because Abe Lincoln in Illinois. I remember watching you in Abe Lincoln in Illinois, and you and I do a lot of things very similarly. Actually, we kind of play the bad guy, if you will. We kind of play the
It has an edge. It has an edge.
Yeah. I mean, I believe it's so wonderful to hear you talk about your experience with Into the Woods, because that's what we all go through. We all go through the preview process in every show, right? This was pretty intense for you guys with Into the Woods, which top 5 best musicals of all time. So I mean, you've done some remarkable things, and I'm not going to take up any more of this.
Well,
this Locher Room situation.
It's so interesting because without your wife, you would not have been in this profession.
Correct.
Robert, somebody took him to see Men of La Mancha. He wasn't looking to get it. It's sort of wild, the great success you both have had, and it wasn't sort of on your radar.
No, maybe that's one of the wonderful things that I didn't know that connected us. There was something going on when I'm a community theater kid, so I was doing community theater. And so I had no choice. I had to study something and somebody, and I just loved every single vocal choice this superhuman was making. And so that's what I did. I mean, come on, dude.
I literally have no idea who you're talking about. Absolutely no freaking relationship between that and what I know when I look at
Kim knows.
But thank you.
Kim Crosby knows. She knows.
Michael, before you go, smile. We're going to take a picture of the 3 of us.
All right.
Hold on 1 second. 1, 2, and 3.
Beautiful.
All right.
Thank you, Michael. I know you got to go to rehearsal.
I love your glasses. Where'd you get your glasses?
Oh, these are easy peasy.
Okay.
IZIPIZI. Easy peasy.
Okay. All
they're
right.
like $40. They're $40, Bob. We can.
I know. Mine are the same thing. Mine are like 38.
Break a leg in the show, Michael.
Thanks.
All the best, Michael. Wow.
So good seeing you.
Thanks for dropping by.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.
What a treat. What a wonderful treat. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. I love that. I wasn't sure he would be able to do it because I know he was in rehearsal. You talked about meeting Kim, but I heard you tell this story of the wolf costume fitting and all of that. Can you share that, because it really will make everybody pee in their pants?
It is, I think, pretty funny. So the wolf, the costume, Anne Hould Ward designed the costumes, and at that time, is Barbara Matera still a functioning costume department? Anyway, Barbara Matera was the premier costume lady in New York. She was actually located in Michael Bennett's building at 890 Broadway. So you rehearsed there, you got your hats done there, you got your shoes done by Gus there, you got your costumes done by Barbara Matera. So it was a one-stop shop for Broadway shows, right? And so the costume design, I worked with Anne. No, that was the sets. Never mind. I'll shut up. So anyway. We had our first costume fitting for the wolf, and if everybody's seen the wolf's costume, you know what it looks like. What you don't see is that the genitalia of the wolf in the original costume was graphic. Okay.
Let me just say, it looked a little graphic even in the PBS that I watched.
Right, but that was a tenth of what it was.
Wow.
Okay, it had. I'll just say it. It had dangling, swinging testicles and a larger penis. Okay, and it was very, very feral and primitive and absolutely realistic. Okay, so I remember that first costume fitting I had. Barbara Matera was a very distinguished woman, and. And the first costume I think I had it for as is the case usually, any costume piece or whatever that has hair on it, they make the hair longer than it needs to be so that they can trim it according to exactly how the designer wants that hair to look, right? Such was the case with the entire wolf costume, including the genitalia. So there was Barbara Matera, one of the grand dames of costumes on Broadway, on her knees on the floor in front of me with a pair of scissors, pulling and combing the hair down of my wolf testicles and trimming them up, right? And the room was filled with other ladies and apprentices, but it was all female. I remember that. And we started giggling so hard that she said, we've got to stop, because her hands were shaking because she was laughing so hard, okay? Because there was this penis staring her in the face and she was trimming it, okay? So we get into preview or rehearsals and tech, and everything's going fine. It's a very hot costume. We had to end up cutting the head piece out so that I could sweat or breathe and through the top of my head, which I couldn't do in the beginning. Anyway, we worked out all the problems, and I come on for the first entrance, and I jump out from behind like an arbor, a metal arbor. And I jump out and I say, hello, little girl, right? And I do it, and I'm facing down right, which means that the house left audience can see me full frontal, but the house right audience can only see me in side view. And I go, hello, little girl. And sure enough, the penis, the testicles start swaying, because I have to stop, and there's a little after energy there. And they started howling with laughter. Okay. And the other side of the house did not know what they were laughing at. And then Danny crosses the stage, and I go something, I think the line was like, whither goest thou? Right. And then house right realizes what house left was laughing at, and they explode in laughter. Well, while all this is happening, nobody can hear our lines. Okay. And we're establishing the relationship between who the wolf is, where he comes from, what he wants, all that stuff. So, great laughs, but they were not serving the dramatic function of that particular role, of that particular scene. So Steve and James got together with Ann and said, well, we got to trim it down, right? So the next night I came in, the penis was a little bit shorter, the balls were a little bit less pendulous, and I come on the stage, hello, little girl, huge laugh, hello, little girl, huge laugh, right? Can't hear the lines. So night by night, over the course of maybe, I don't know, six days of performances, they kept trimming down the penis and the testicles, right? And so I've said, I'm being gelded, right in plain sight by the public, in plain view of the public. Anyway, by the time we finally got to what you now see, it was just kind of a pouch that did not move, and a little kind of suggestion of white and blah, blah, blah there. But it was not,
Yeah, I'm sure it would have been more distracting if it was moving on my TV screen.
I actually have a picture in my file somewhere of James Nadeau, who was my dresser at the time. Great guy. And he's standing there. We're in tech, and he's in front of me on his knees, and he's fixing something on my costume, and that penis is sitting there staring him in the face. It is so
that's wild. I'm curious. You said ACT and arena stage, you learned basically so much.
Yes, indeed.
Could you put into words sort of what you learned that you now try, specifically what you impart to your students that you teach, that you took from those experiences and are passing on?
Sure. Well, there's so much to acting, and there's so many ways that you can approach it. But I think that one of the key things that I learned is that there's a lot of ways to get to fully be yourself on stage, right? And not an imitation of something, and not an imitation of somebody, or an imitation of an action or an emotion, but actually be present on stage, and actually be available on stage, and to live fully and truthfully. It's Meisner, right? And one of the things that I teach is that it doesn't matter how you get there. There's no master technique that's right for everybody. I think Meisner for me is a gold standard, but for some people Meisner just does not resonate. Maybe Stanislavski or Uta Hagen or Chekhov or whoever, Grotowski, all that. However you get there is nobody's, is your business in terms of how you train. Your job is to live fully under imaginary circumstances, and you have to learn, and so for some people it takes years to get there. You have to learn that you are enough, and that's your superpower. Your superpower is exactly who you are. So your journey as an actor, I think, is your journey as a human being, is figuring out, who am I really? Not what people want me to be, or not what people think I am because of what they see, but what I actually am, and bringing that kind of work to your work, to bring all of who you are, and bringing that through the prism of whatever the given circumstances are, and allowing your true self, your true soul, your true essence to interface with that particular character in those given circumstances. So there's no separation ever between you and the character. You are the character, and you are enough. And now let's see what we can do in terms of focusing that and raising the stakes so that you can live as fully as possible, turn the screws on your character as tightly as you can, so you have to fight like hell for your scene objective and use all of who you are to get it. And it's exciting when you get there. And if you're working with other people who are in the same place, you get this wonderful collision of wills and needs and wants on stage, and it's fresh every night, and all of that stuff. So I think that's what I learned, because I worked with some really good actors at that time. Robert Prosky, I don't know if you know who Robert Prosky is. He was a wonderful.
Oh yeah.
And he did. I think his first big film was Thief with James Caan, and he was in his 60s, I think, when he got that role. But he was at Arena Stage for 23 years when I first got there. Raised a family in regional theater, and then all of a sudden he got a film. But he had all of this experience that he brought to film, and he became sort of the character actor in Hollywood for at least another 10 years there. So that was sort of the playground that I had, the training ground that I had in the very beginning, and I'm forever grateful to Zelda Chandler. She was the founder of Arena Stage, and a lot of Tony Award-winning plays were generated out of the workshops that they created there. The Great White Hope came out of that workshop there with James Earl Jones. There was just, all kinds of other masterful works that came because of her genius as a producer and a director. And she directed me in a production of Crucible at Arena Stage, and I played John Proctor. And we took that play to Israel for an international theater festival.
Oh, wow.
And opened in Israel, in Jerusalem, and then we took it back and inserted it as the final play of the season at Arena Stage. And my time with Zelda as a director and Jack O'Brien as a director for The Full Monty, those two directors for me were seminal in terms of me realizing what good directors do, how good directors get actors to get to a place where they can live fully and freely without judgment, so that they can be who they are within that particular world. I cannot possibly overstate my gratitude to those two people for the opportunities that they created and for the example that they showed me.
I love, hearing the passion that you still have for it.
Yeah, I do. I really do.
You feel it. I mean, it really comes through. I have to ask before I let you go, because fans are, Prince Raymond, One Life to Live, Paul Rausch. How did that come about for you? And I know Paul was a big theater lover.
Yes. So after I finished talk about typecasting. I finished Into the Woods, and then all of a sudden, well, I guess he plays princes, right? So they contacted me about this, and they were I'd never done a soap before, and I really wanted the screen time, right? Because I had not had a lot of screen time, and I wanted to learn about that medium and be able to, scale it down. And
that's the place to learn.
Exactly. And it's every day and learning all that text and blah, blah, blah. So I was offered that contract, and I'll just tell you the story, not to raise me up in anything, but about the stupidity of what I did. I don't know if it was stupid or not. So I was in the middle of the contract negotiations for that, and Stephen Sondheim called me on my phone at home, in my apartment in New York. to ask me if I would play the role, and I can't remember the character's name, in Merrily We Roll Along at Kennedy Center, which was going to be a preview to try to bring it back for revival into New York. He called me. Steve Sondheim called me. And I was sitting there with that contract that I had not signed yet for One Life to Live. And it was like a 1-year commitment if it went that long, right? And I had to make a choice right there. And I said, Steve, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I just got this contract and with a lot of screen time. He said, what is it? I said, it's a soap opera, One Life to Live. And there was a long silence.
I'm sure.
And he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, Steve, I've done so much at that point, and I've done in Blue for 2 years, not to mention the other shows I'd done before that, right? I went from one show to the next, and I'm very lucky and very grateful. But now it's like, now I have a chance to have some meaty screen time. And I said, I think I'm going to go with the soap opera. Long silence. He went, okay, see you later. And he hung up. And I didn't hear from him for another couple of years. Wow. And the next thing that I did with him was I got called for Company, for the Broadway revival of Company for Harry. And I got that. So I ended up, so I sort of reconnected with Steve at that time. So we'd done Sunday in the Park, and then we did Into the Woods. And then he asked me if I would do Merrily. I mean, what an honor. Holy shit. What an honor. And I said no. And I thought, and when I hung up, I just thought, I think I've just submarined my entire career. And then luckily we reconnected, and then I did Company with him. And then I did workshops of Assassins. And I did another workshop with him of another show of Wise Guys. And then I did something else. So we ended up doing other projects together. So I did not.
Was it worth doing One Life for you? Did you learn a lot?
I think so. Yeah. I'm not sure, but yes, it was very helpful in terms of just learning. I think learning what not to do more than learning what to do. Like, oh, Bob, so stop.
And did you get to go to Austria?
Yes, we went to Austria.
That's not bad.
It was not bad. We were there for, I don't know, about 7 or 8 days or something, sitting in this incredible hotel. We stayed in Salzburg, one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, with some of the most gorgeous medieval. It's the birthplace of Mozart, right? And the castle is still there. That was built long before Mozart was born, like from the 800s or whatever, with torture rooms and all that stuff. It was sensational. Salzburg is actually, it means salt. And it's where most of the salt was found underneath a mountain in Salzburg, where most of the salt for Europe was mined. Oh, wow. And the archbishops of that time, the Archbishop of Salzburg was one of the most powerful people in Europe because he had the monopoly on salt. Anyway, little side note. but yes, so that was fun. I mean, yeah, so I learned a lot. But thank God I got reunited with Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. What do you remember about Paul Rausch? Was he tough?
I just remembered him. He had a really gregarious personality. I loved his energy. Do you know what I mean? He was kind to me. He was also teaching. I mean, he'd come and give notes sometimes and say, you're pushing it. So I can see your theater training here. You just need to back off on that. And so he was extremely helpful to me in terms of helping to adapt to a smaller screen.
I love that.
Yeah.
My last question, what's the most rewarding thing about teaching and seeing your students do what
gosh. Well, obviously I think, one is seeing them do well, right? And to see them get genuinely excited about, I try to simplify acting for them, and some of them have had not a lot of training or have not had, I don't know, an organic training, and so when I get them, I boil it down for them. I try to take the mystique away from acting and try to take the inspiration away from it and the emotion away from it and try to focus their attention on the action of the character, and then the passion and all that comes afterwards, I think, but once they get a sort of a blue collar toolkit in terms of approaching acting, something they can actually apply for the rest of their lives, they there's this aha moment, and then you see their work really start getting more grounded, more personalized, more specific, more in the moment. Their listening skills start to develop, and it's extraordinarily gratifying. It is not a selfless thing to do in the least, is teaching.
And you're directing Titanic right now, correct?
I'm directing Titanic right now. Yes.
Will that be something, if there are people watching in your area, that they can get tickets to, or is it just
absolutely? It's at University of Colorado Boulder, and they could just go to the the university website and find it. And it's at the Mackey Theater, and I think it seats about, I don't know, almost 2,000 people. And so we're only doing 3 performances. They are March 15, 16, and 17 in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay, so March 15th, 16th, and 17th. When did you start on the?
Well, we started pre-production about 8 months ago, but in terms of developing the design and the concept and all that. But we started actual music, just teaching music, about 3.5 weeks ago. And then I've started actual blocking. I'm finishing up tonight my 2nd week of blocking, and I will have Act 1 on its feet, and we march forward. It is a brutally complicated musical in terms of there's so many plates spinning in the air. The Act 1, Scene 1, the opening number, it took me a week to block that one number.
I'm gonna play my soundtrack when we're done. I have not listened to that in a long time.
So glorious. Oh my God.
I love it. I remember loving that show.
Yeah.
Robert, really. It's such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Alan, it was my pleasure, and thank you for having me. I'm honored that you even consider me to be a worthy participant.
When Michael spoke so highly, I thought it would be a great follow-up to that.
I mean, like I said, I've been in education for almost 20 years now, so I've done some performing, but so I don't even think of myself in those terms anymore. So well, I'm a grandfather.
You were telling Michael you didn't know who he was talking about.
Changing diapers. So here we go.
Oh yeah, congratulations on being a granddad. I'm sure that's the best role.
Right, and that's to explain to any viewers out there. The reason I'm in Longmont, Colorado, is my daughter went to medical school here, and she met her future husband here, who's a lawyer in Longmont, and so they settled here and started having children, and now we're here to be near the grandchildren.
A doctor and a lawyer?
Yeah, she's not a doctor. She has her master's, and she runs a health clinic and does all that. She's a physician's associate. Yes.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend and good luck with Titanic.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you to Robert Westenberg and Michael Park for stopping by. Please join me next Wednesday on Valentine's Day when Emmy-nominated actor and Emmy Award-winning host Cameron Matheson stops by to talk about his role as Drew Kane on General Hospital. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. And I hope if you liked today's episode, you click the like button. It always helps. And don't forget, you can listen to audio versions of The Locher Room. Just search The Locher Room on your favorite streaming platform. Have a great afternoon, everybody, or actually have a great weekend, everybody. I will see you next week. And as always, please stay safe.